Alrighty, welcome to episode 306 of Backpacking America. And today, in the spirit of our show, we are going through declassified government documents. Our first declassified government document was the Afghanistan papers in 2000 and I believe 19. Thank you to the Trump administration for declassifying that. And in the continuing spirit of his urge to declassify documents, we are going over the JFK files. And this is one of the many thousands and thousands of documents, specifically 60,000 documents. It numbers to about 60,000. Well, actually, it's a little less than it's actually a lot less than 60,000, but there's 60,000 pages of these declassified files. And we are going through 7 pages of them today, and they are quite revealing, just these 7 pages. What I am holding here today is a memo to the president about the Central Intelligence Agency, authored by Arthur Schlesinger, who was a CIA operative at the time. And he said the subject matter was CIA reorganization. It was dated June 30th, 1961. This was after the Bay of Pigs invasion, I believe. And it was a massive, massive rundown of the Central Intelligence Agency's structure, goals, and their lack of understanding of their own operations in certain cases. So what does Mr. Schlesinger say? So the CIA is essentially a state within a state, which means a government within a government. The top brass, so to speak, the leadership of the CIA, was generally unaware of the activities of the lower level and mid-level agents within the organization and their affairs. So Central Intelligence Agency is much like, say, the federal government. You know, the president, the vice president, his cabinet, staffers at the White House, staffers in the Capitol building. They don't know what some low-level politician in Georgia or Long Island is doing. They don't understand what a state representative in New York or Idaho is necessarily doing or organizing in their day-to-day because they're so far removed. It's a far, far down the rung problem that no one really knows. It's the same thing with CIA. CIA has thousands of low-level and mid-level agents operating and doing things. And the CIA gives, the top brass gives orders to the lower guys. But the lower guys, they want to make a name for themselves. It's lower level, CIA in Washington attracts, is according to Mr. Schlesinger and my notes here, and what's found in the document, is it attracts the best of the best. The above board of the above board, old English stock, so to speak, your typical well-to-do American from a wealthy background. That is who CIA in Washington tracks. But the field operative is a special type of person. The field operative is zealous. They're dedicated. They earn their pay. They, according to Mr. Schlesinger, feel like they're not earning their pay if they're not commencing a certain amount of coups on foreign governments, be them friendly or not friendly. And this zealous dedication to guerrilla campaigns in foreign countries has led the CIA to execute missions out of paranoia and fear of losing control specifically to the communists. And that's in paragraph 2, page 6 of this letter that was written by Mr. Schlesinger to President Kennedy at the time. So this zealous dedication, especially by the few. So CIA executes these ops. And what happens is the low-level guys go and do whatever the fuck they want. They don't really tell CIA brass what's going on. They're just like, we're organizing an operation and we're developing contingencies in case the operation fails. And CIA leadership says, okay. And what ends up happening is these CIA operatives put these plans in motion and have these contingencies in motion in case certain plans fail. So much to the point where CIA is then presented all this and they're like, wow, holy shit. Well, we can't really say no to this because the CIA agents really think, our main plan's going to fail and we need to execute these contingencies, or we just need to execute all the plans at once and to just cover all of our bases. So then what they do is they press the State Department. And the State Department is really the above ground, more approachable version of the CIA, where the State Department essentially, they have agents and such, but their whole thing is processing information they receive and creating interpretations that are unbiased and try to get the Department of Defense and Congress to execute upon the new data they found. CIA also does its own research and development and has people going and executing data. So they're doing their own internal data analysis, execution, and interpretation without the advisement of anyone else, which leads to internal biases and coming to conclusions that may not even be relatively sound or stable of mind. So they're operating completely independently, and they're forcing the State Department and the above ground organizations of intelligence to get in line. So pretty much what CIA does is they get so far in an op, they get so far in research and so far down the river without a paddle that they say to state, if you back out of this and you veto this operation, the communists will win. Because all of our foreign assets, the guys we've trained, the safe houses we've established, the money we've laundered, that'll all go away and it'll go to the communists and it'll make us look like we're instigating things around the world, and the communists will win in another country and will probably jeopardize us and all these other countries, and these other covers will get blown and so on and so forth. It seems like the end of the world. So states like, oh shit, well, I guess you're right. I guess we have to do it even though we don't agree. And this has been the cycle throughout the Cold War and probably today too. But this is covering the Cold War, so I won't speculate about today. But that was the logic to get CIA ops approved by above ground intelligence. So pretty much we get to page 7, and basically from all that was laid out in this whole document, JFK vetoed the Bay of Pigs while it was going on. So he initially approved it because he was ham-fisted by CIA and State Department. And then he said, you know what? I'm pulling out the rest of the op. So he didn't allow for air support. Basically, the United States Air Force was going to bomb Cuba and give the CIA operatives that trained the CIA operatives trained the Cubans in Miami to invade Cuba. So when I say CIA operatives, I'm talking about them in this specific case, the CIA, the Cuban operatives that were going to invade Cuba to liberate it. So JFK said, you know what? This is going to escalate things out of control. I am not bombing Cuba with American airplanes, with U.S. Air Force airplanes. There's just no way I'm doing it. So what happened was there was also no uprisings as a result of this. Because if there was if these guys had air support, they'd probably move in and be able to get into the towns and tell, the guys in the militia, hey, we're here to liberate Cuba. Let's overthrow Castro. That didn't happen. So they got slaughtered on the beaches and taken captive. And it was a huge, it was an escalation, but it wasn't as bad as it would have been if the U.S. Air Force was involved. So CIA was pissed about this. And it was everything they feared would happen expressed on page 6. So these low-level and mid-level operatives were furious because they were losing control. They were losing control of the plot. Their whole thing was that they were absolutely dedicated to overthrowing communism. They were absolutely dedicated to do it by any means necessary, even if it meant risking their lives. And they were incredibly afraid and paranoid of not only losing control, but losing control to the communists, losing their assets to the communists. And that's exactly what happened in the Bay of Pigs. They lost their Cuban assets to the communists. Some of them probably talked, and the Americans were involved, and it blew cover all over Latin America. Probably. I don't know for sure, but I would not be surprised if it blew cover all over Latin America and the Americans' designs on Cuba. So it made it more difficult to execute ops in Cuba as a result, because this was a major operation that just got blown. And I'm not justifying the reaction here. I'm just explaining the logic of these CIA operatives. So then, you have the CIA also assuming, like I said before, they're assuming research and intelligence procurement. So this is going to lead to this biased outlook where, oh my God, an op has failed, and now we're going to lose all this to the communists, and we lost so much ground, and we're losing control. We have to do something about it. So because they have this monopoly on research, procurement, development, and operation execution, they basically can, they're a state within a state. They're able to do whatever the fuck they want. So they basically said, you know what? We're going to come to our own conclusions. We don't need state. We're just going to convince them just for a formality, but we really don't need the State Department. So basically, from all this information that I've deduced from this 7-page document, some pages were cut out where I got it from. There are people on X that are posting these, as well as what I'm looking through in my own research. But this is what I've gotten so far from the memo. If anyone wants the files, I'm going to link the files in the podcast description for everyone to access them. Download them as soon as you can. They are also 2 gigabytes each, so make sure your device or storage device has the room. They are massive files. Like I said, they're 30,000 each file, 30,000 pages each file. But my conclusion is this from just reading this, and this is going to be a series on the JFK files. I'm going to be going through the files and releasing whatever I find and my own opinions on it, and maybe, share your opinions in the comments below, what you think happened and what you think you interpret the CIA or the government to acted on based off of your own reading. But my conclusion is this. I believe low-level and mid-level field agents, not CIA proper, facilitated the Kennedy assassination, as their zeal and paranoia of losing control of assets to the Soviets outweighed realistic scenarios and outcomes of losing control of an operation. Kennedy was seen as a threat by these agents. Wanting transparency meant their operations would be shut down by the government and the State Department. So they would lose their sense of self-worth, their mission statement, and everything that made them wake up in the morning. So to them, killing Kennedy restored the status quo that the CIA was a state within a state and could execute its own operations as it saw fit. And that is why I believe they assassinated Kennedy, just based off of this document and how Arthur Schlesinger described the average low to mid-level CIA operative as overly zealous and believed they weren't earning their keep if they weren't killing enough people and overthrowing enough democracies. To me, Kennedy, and if you look at some of these other targets of the CIA, some of them friendly to the U.S. government, some of them not so friendly, they all had in common one thing. They did not want clandestine operations happening in their country, and they wanted open transparency with the world and with their citizenry. Kennedy wanted open transparency, and that was a direct threat to the CIA and these low-level operatives, because they would lose all sorts of self-worth, control, and mission purpose if it was given to State Department, which was above ground and more accessible to the American people. And John F. Kennedy wanted, 1, he wanted more transparency. 2, he wanted a detente with the Soviet Union and to de-escalate the Cold War and to return to American-Soviet relations of the 1930s, where it was friendly. It wasn't like we were buddy-buddy and super allies, but we were friendly and we were not at odds with each other. The United States was more isolationist and worried about itself, and the Soviets were more worried about their self and their sphere of influence. That's it. We wanted our sphere of influence safe from European intervention, and they wanted their space safe from Western intervention. And that is what Kennedy was going towards, and that was a direct threat to CIA, because if there was no Cold War, there was no CIA. So that is my conclusion on this. Let me know what you guys think. I don't have the link to this specific paper. I did get it from X, so I will link the account and the post where I got this account. I'm sure you could also Google this if you want to Google it and find it. It is June 30th, 1961, Memorandum for the President, subject CIA Reorganization. So you can most likely find this online now. It is a declassified document. We will also be covering when the MLK files get declassified as well, and when the Epstein files actually get fully released, we will be looking at those as well. So definitely let me know what you think in the comments when you read this and you read any other JFK files. And until next time, see you for episode 307.